So grateful to be with you this morning, and glad that you're joining us for worship. If you're watching on Facebook, please sign in and give us a shout out. Let us know that you're with us this morning, and we would like to welcome you into our fellowship, into our worship. And I'm going to just this morning, have you seen the movie Bruce Almighty? It's an old movie. I know it's been around for a long time. There's a great scene in this movie. Jim Carrey's Bruce, and his life is kind of coming apart. He's in a relationship, and it's not going very well, and he has a job, and it's not going very well, and he's kind of at a crisis point, and he's driving down the road, and he cries out, "God, give me a sign, just give me a sign." And as he's driving down the road, there's a sign off to the right-hand side. I would show this to you, but Facebook won't let me. And so anyway, so there's a sign off to the side of the road, and it's blinking, "Caution ahead, caution, caution." And he's like, "Arr!" And then a truck pulls in front of him, and it's a Department of Transportation truck, and it's got signs all in the back of the truck, and it's signs like "Stop," "Yield," "Turn," "U-turn," all these things are saying, and he's just saying, "Give me a sign, give me a sign." And the truck pulls in front of him, and all these things are saying "Stop," "Yield," and he's angry, and he races around the truck, and he crashes his car, and then he's at his wit's end. It's like, I cried out to you, God, I prayed to you, and this is what I get as a result. Give me a sign. We're in the second week of a series. And again, I want to give credit to Andy Stanley. He wrote a book called The Principle of the Path, and also to King Solomon, which is where Andy Stanley got the wisdom that is contained in the book, The Principle of the Path. But we're in the second week of this series, and the basis, the general idea of this series, the driving theme is this: that direction determines destination. In the course of our lives, that it's not what we want to happen, or not what we wish will happen, or not what we would like for to happen that happens. It's what happens as a result of the direction, the path that we walk down takes us to a destination. And if we want to go someplace, but we're walking in a different direction, no matter how good our intentions are, or how deep our desires are, we will never get to where we're going unless we're going the right direction. So it's a good idea. It's a good idea to give thought to your direction. Where does the path that I'm walking down right now, where does it lead to? And is that where I want to go? The hard thing can be this: it's not always clear where the path that we're on is going to take us. We don't always know for sure just by kind of looking at the beginning of the path where that is going to land us. Because life is full of firsts. And when you're doing something for the very first time, you don't necessarily know what the outcome of that first is going to be. You know, we have our first child, and our first relationship, and our first day of school, and our first job, and all those firsts, and every one of them are learning experiences, and we see things, and from them we observe things, we make conclusions, and so we gain wisdom over time. But it's not always clear at the very beginning where this road, where this path that we're on is going to take us. And once we're on a path, it can be even harder once we're moving down a path that maybe we realize, hey, I shouldn't be on this path. It's even harder to change course. All of which brings us back to the wisdom of Solomon. Right? Solomon was considered the wisest man that ever lived. He was a king of Israel. When he became king as a young man, God gave him one favor: ask me anything. And Solomon asked for, above all things, not wealth, not power. Solomon asked for wisdom. And God granted him that wisdom. And so when you turn to the book of Proverbs, you find the wisdom of God that had been imparted to Solomon. And so in chapter 27, verse 12, about walking down this path and finding our way, even in the midst of all these firsts, Solomon says this. He says, "The prudent see danger and they take refuge, but the simple keep going and suffer for it." The prudent, when they're walking down a path, they're looking ahead down the path. And if they see something ahead, if they see a curve in the road, they see fog coming down, the prudent look down and they look ahead in the path. And when they look ahead, they see danger. And when they see danger, when it's coming up before them, they connect the dots. They look ahead and they say, hey, I'm going down this road and I see that there's something up ahead, and I'm seeing that if I continue down this path, if I make this choice, if I can do this act, if I go this direction, that it's going to lead to harm. And in light of what they see, they connect the dots from their current decisions to their future, and they change course. They take refuge. They recognize that how they respond to today will shape what happens in their future. And they adjust accordingly. They take refuge. They do something about it. The simple see danger, or maybe they don't. Maybe they're just plowing ahead, head down, moving ahead, or maybe they look ahead and they see something, but when they see it or they don't see it, they don't do anything about it. They don't recognize it for what it is. Or maybe they think, oh, it'll be okay. Maybe it doesn't work out for others, but it'll work out for me. They assume that everything will go okay in the end. And so they continue headlong down the path that they're on. Oftentimes, the easy way, the path of least resistance, right? That's the easiest way. I'm just going to continue down this road because to change course, to do something different is going to make my life more difficult. It's going to make this situation more challenging. To continue, I'm just going to go on the path of least resistance, which almost always leads to a harder path in the future. And this counsel applies to so many aspects of our lives. If you read through the book of Proverbs, Solomon applies his wisdom to the way that we use our tongue. He talks about it in terms of how we manage our anger, in terms of how we make our decisions. He talks about it in terms of a couple of his favorite subjects are in terms of relationships. How we make decisions when we're going down a path and we're in a relationship, and are we looking to the future and are we seeing things ahead? When a couple comes to me and they're having marriage woes, and just kind of that introductory conversation, how's it going? How did you get to this? No one ever says, you know what? The wheels just came off yesterday. It's like, when did this start? How long has this been going on? It's always 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or oftentimes even, this was a deal even before we ever got married. This has always been an issue in our relationships. Relationships are never static. They're dynamic. They're always moving. They're always going in one direction or another. And because relationships are always moving, you can't evaluate a relationship on the basis of what the status is today. You have to evaluate a relationship based on the direction that it's going. Looking at how it is today, if we continue on this path that we're on, going the way that it is today, where is that going to lead us in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years? So when your spouse comes to you and says, honey, we need to talk. We need to get some help. And you say, is it really that bad? You're looking at the current situation. You're saying today, no, I'm looking at it. It doesn't seem that bad. And your spouse is looking down the road in the future and saying, maybe it's not that bad today, but if we continue not that bad today, it could be really bad tomorrow. There's a crack in a relationship, in an important relationship. You're on a path. And if we follow that path, it has a destination. Another of Solomon's favorite subjects, he talks about finances. Prudent see danger. They take refuge. The wise, the simple keep on going. Solomon, he talks about finances. He says, hey, if you are about debt, he takes it to a thing. He says, if you live beyond your means, if you are borrowing money, he says that the borrower becomes servant to the lender. If you're on a path of debt as a way of living, he said at the end of the day, you are going to be a slave to the person or the people or the entity that you owe money to. It's a warning sign. There's a dangerous curve ahead. Change direction. See, no money down. No payments for 6 months. Is a decision today that is assuming upon the future. It's saying, seize this day, forget about, don't worry about tomorrow. If you're a parent and you're ignoring signs in your child's behavior, things that are going on or sudden shifts, and you think, oh, it'll just work out. Well, maybe it's just a phase. Maybe you just need to monitor for a while, but keep your head up, keep looking down the road. Where, if it continues on this path, where does it go? If you're a rescuer, if you see the dangers of other people's lives, and you look ahead and say, hey, if they continue down this path, then there's going to be a problem. And they get to that problem, and you say, I'm going to rescue them from that problem because I don't want the people that I love to hurt. You're actually playing the part of the simple person looking down the road again, right? Solomon said, if you rescue someone, they will repeat their behavior and you will have to do it again. That we are all on a path that has a destination. And there's a part of me, and I think a part of many of us, that wants to say, when we get into those, when we come to those places where we hit the danger zone, where the wheels fall off, where the relationship is falling apart, and we're like, how did this happen? Or we come to that place where our finances are a wreck, and we have bills stacked up, and the debt collectors are calling. And it's like, and we want to at that point they cry out to God. God, where are you? Why is this happening? What are you doing? God, help me, because God's mercies are new each day. Great is His faithfulness. God, get me out of this problem. Why doesn't God just fix it for me? Where's God? God lovingly created a world with order. And it's because the world has order that we are able to enjoy it and learn about it. It's because things work a certain way. And then God lovingly reveals to us in His Word how that world works. And so we can look at the Scriptures and we can see Solomon say, hey, when you borrow money, you become servant to the lender. He's saying this is how the world works. When you're angry and you act upon that anger, this is how the world works. When you are a fool, one of my favorite passages, because it is so deep in my heart and important to me, it says, even a fool is considered wise if they keep their mouth shut. This is how it works. You can even be a fool, but you'll be okay if you just don't talk. There's a way things work, and he helps us understand that. And then He lovingly gives us the Spirit to guide us in applying those things to our lives, to resource us for living. And then recognizing that sometimes we do make mistakes, and sometimes we go off the rails, and sometimes we don't know the rules, or we don't work in a cooperation with how the world works, that God lovingly gave us His Son to forgive us for our sins. But here's where we sometimes miss the exit. That forgiveness does not eliminate consequences. It eliminates condemnation, judgment. It eliminates the idea that this is the end of the road, that there's always a future beyond it. Forgiveness does a lot for us. Forgiveness is essential, but forgiveness does not eliminate all consequences. For example, right? If you came up to me and you took a 2x4 and you whacked me over the head with it, I could forgive you for hitting me in the head with the 2x4. But I would still have a mark on my head, maybe a gash or a cut, maybe a concussion. The consequences of being hit in the head with a 2x4 would still be there even if I forgave you. Because this is how the world works. If the 2x4 didn't maintain its pressure under density, whether that density is like my forehead, if it didn't maintain its pressure or its density under that pressure, then it wouldn't hold our house up either. It's how it's made. It's how it works. Principles create the potential, the possibility of predictable outcomes in the world. Principles create the possibility, the potential for predictable outcomes. It's why you can go on a cruise, right? We can go on a cruise because some guy named Archimedes, I think that's right, Archimedes, right, found out that if the water displaced by an object is greater than the weight of the object, that object will float. It's a principle. We can fly in planes because of Bernoulli's principle. There's a way that things work. We have medicine. We have a vaccine for a virus that we're fighting, and the reason that they can make vaccines, the reason we have medicine and medication is because they study the order of how our bodies were made and how viruses work, because there's an order to those things, and then they figure out how to manipulate that order with other things that work a certain way to accomplish that. Without that, without principles that give us predictable outcomes, the world would be completely random. We couldn't make any sense out of anything because we would never know what any action would result in, what outcome would result from any action. It's the only way that life could make sense. Now, there are rare exceptions to the principles, and it seems like the principles or the exceptions often get a lot of the press, right? Sure, your great Uncle Joe maybe smoked 2 packs a day for 90 years, but Uncle Joe was the exception, right? If you want a health plan, don't follow that, because for every one person who lives a long life, there are 1,000 people who died in early death. A handful of people never save a dime. I mean, like one handful. Maybe their retirement plan is, I'm going to play the lottery every day until the day that I retire, and some time along the way I'm going to win the lottery, and that's going to take care of my retirement. Maybe, right? For a couple people that works out. It's the exception, though. Most of us, if we do that, are going to end up under a bridge. The exceptions get the press, but the principles give order to our lives. And so, if we want to do as Solomon says, right? What's required of us? What do we have to do? Well, step one is recognition, right? See the danger. The inability to see is often the result of our unwillingness to see. We don't see because we didn't want to see, or because we never looked up. It's the old adage, love is blind. Is it? Well, it's blind because when we're in love, we're so enthralled with all of the emotions and the desire and the passion and the dream of all those things that we turn a blind eye to so many other things that are going on around us. We have to see the danger. That means that we're going to have to reflect on our lives. We're going to have to look at where we are, and we're going to have to anticipate where we're going and look to the future. We have to pray for the Spirit's guidance and study God's Word because it gives us directions on how things work so that we can see the danger. We're going to have to maybe get counsel from some people that we know who love us and care about us and will help us see things that maybe that we're not seeing. Because sometimes we don't see very well. We're going to recognize, or to acknowledge, we're going to have an ounce of humility to be able to allow other people to speak into our lives and to trust maybe they're seeing things that we're not seeing, at least long enough to pause and consider it. It begins with recognition. See the danger. And then reaction. Right? When you see the danger, take refuge. We have to do something. If we see a relationship that's falling apart, or our parenting isn't going well, and our kids are going to, maybe we need to shift priorities. Maybe we need to do some study. Maybe we need to take a class. Maybe we need to see a counselor. If we're living beyond our means, right? Maybe we need to take Financial Peace University from Dave Ramsey, or maybe we need to take it again. In fact, this week, Ramsey is doing a podcast. If you email me, and I'll give you my email address in a few minutes. If you email me, I'll send you that link and you can watch it. I promise you, it is an infomercial for Financial Peace University, but he will give you some information that will at least help you and point you in the right direction, even if you don't take the class. But it's seeing the danger and then doing something about it. It's like going to school every day, getting your education. I used to run down the Los Coyotes riverbed when I lived over in Cerritos, and it runs along one of the high schools over there. And oftentimes I'm running down the riverbed, I would see two groups of people. I would see people who were experiencing homelessness and students cutting class. And I know there are a lot of reasons that people experience homelessness that are not their own fault. I mean, there's mental health issues and all kinds of things that factor into that. But it also happens sometimes, and it gets you at least a step down the road, right? If you don't get an education, I want to say to these kids that you're in school under a bridge next to people who are living under a bridge, and maybe you're on a path that you don't want to be on. Pay attention. React to the situation. If your friends you're walking with friends and you're always ending up someplace that you don't want to be, maybe you need to walk with a different set of friends. Recognition. React to what you see. And then, almost always, we're going to have to give something up. We're going to have to make sacrifices. Sacrifices in what we buy or what we don't buy, sacrifices in our lifestyle, sacrifices in our in our relationships, sacrifice maybe in our comfort. And it's because it's going to require something of us that we don't want to do it. It's because if I live within my means, that means I can't do all these other things that I want to do right now. Maybe in the future I can do them, maybe later on I can do them, but right now I can't do them and so we have to sacrifice that to change the direction that we're on. Dave Ramsey's mantra in Financial Peace is, live like no one else now, because debt is normal, because being broke is normal. He says, live like no one else now so that you can live like no one else later. Make the hard choices now, because the path forward, if you don't, is going to be even harder. And the path forward, if you do, is going to liberate you. It's going to set you free, not just to take care of your own means and to live in peace yourself, but also to help and love and serve other people. We tend to do the opposite. I'm so depressed. I'm so down. I'm going to go shopping. It's a path that has a destination. And that requires courage. These are some of the hardest things in the world to do. The prudent react to what they see on the horizon, not to what's going on in their current circumstances. They look down the road. And so sometimes, because they're looking ahead and they're seeing things that other people maybe aren't seeing, people will look at them and say, wow, you're being really kind of over the top about this. Well, no, I'm seeing something different. You're making decisions based on what you see in the future. And others sometimes will judge you based on what they see in the current circumstances. The hardest decisions I've made in leadership have been times when I have been aware of danger, when I have seen things ahead down the road, and for different reasons, other people couldn't see those things. And I had to make a decision based on what I was seeing and was being judged by the current situation. Hardest decisions I've ever had to make. And some of the worst decisions that I've made in leadership have been when I saw something down the road. And I knew how difficult it would be to do something now. And so I just hoped that it would all work out. I even prayed that it would all work out. But there were principles at work. And I ignored the principles. And I paid the price for those things. It takes incredible courage to be on a path and to see a future and to change course. And it's going to be costly. But Solomon says there's an outcome. There's an outcome in both directions. Okay? The simple keep on going, and they suffer for it. Suffering is in the future if we ignore the principles. I have a fresh example of this, and it's a personal, right? And the lead up to the December food pantry, we had a COVID exposure in our house, and we knew that there was exposure, but it was kind of remote, and Chris got exposed at work, but it was not a very long exposure, and it was outside, but they sent him home and he had to get tested, and we were between the test and the outcome, and I was just sure that he didn't have any symptoms, everything was going to be fine, and it's Friday, and we have to do the preparations for the food pantry for that week, and it's like, we've been exposed, but have we been exposed? Because as soon as Chris got exposed, then we quarantined him, and it's like, do we, don't we, do we? And I just was sure he didn't have it. So I ignored the danger. And we came, and we packed boxes that night, and other people came, and they packed boxes that night, and we were all in the same place. And I did this because it needed to be done. It just needed to be done. And we wanted to come through for the people that we wanted to deliver food to, and it was too late to ask other people, and other people were also kind of in a fragile position, and also exposure. It was just too much trouble to do it a different way, so we went ahead, and I got home that Friday night, and Chris got his results, and he tested positive. And so I had to call all the people that were there that night and say, not just, hey, Chris was tested positive, but I knew that he was going to be tested. And I had to suffer from that Friday until we got a test on Saturday, and Sunday night, we got our results, And by grace of God, and not because of my own sense and the decision, I made the wrong decision, but we were negative, and so we hadn't exposed all the other people who came to help us that night. And had we exposed other people, the suffering would have been immensely more, as I have to think about and pray over and consider all the people that maybe would have gotten sick because we made a bad decision. Because I made a bad decision. So my suffering was limited, but it was real. And it could have been a lot worse. See danger, ignore it. Solomon says, you keep going, we suffer for it. There are two kinds of suffering in the world. There's suffering that happens because we live in a broken world. And it's suffering that is often unavoidable. Like disease happens, pandemics happen, financial downturns happen. There are things that in the world that we cannot control just because the world is broken. There are sometimes things, suffering that we go through that we could control, but we accept that suffering for a greater good. Right? I know that this is going to cost me, but I'm looking at it and I'm saying there's a positive outcome on the other side of it. So I'm willing to go through this suffering because of a broken world, because I know that there's something better on the other side. It's suffering that happens. There's another kind of suffering. One of my early mentors called it senseless suffering. It's the suffering happens because we see danger and we don't take refuge. It's the suffering that happens because we know that we're out on a limb, but we don't do anything about it. It's suffering that happens because we made decisions that cost us. And it's senseless because it didn't need to be so. It didn't need to happen. And the wisdom that Solomon is talking about is the wisdom that says, I see the danger, and I'm going to take refuge. And by taking refuge, I will one day be able to look back and say, wow, thank God that I made this choice, because now I don't have to live with those consequences. It's the relief of being spared. You know, I often hear people say that we only learn by doing, which is to say we all have to make our own mistakes in life. And many of us, it seems like that's true, but that's actually not the only way to learn. It's the hard way to learn. That's why they call it the school of hard knocks. But there are actually other schools that we can attend. And it's learning from the principles of how things work in the world. It's learning from the mistakes and the experiences of other people that would then allow us to make a different choice and not have to study in the school of hard knocks. And so I'm going to close with a prayer. And it's not just a prayer that I want to pray for myself and for you today, but it's a prayer that I want to give to you to use as you move into the future. As you walk down the paths that you're walking on in your relationships, in your career, in your parenting, in your finances, Lord, help us to see trouble coming before it gets here. And give us the wisdom to know what to do and the courage to do it. Lord, help us to see trouble coming before it gets here. and gives us the wisdom to know what to do and the courage to do it. Amen.